Hi everybody, I'm Mike Bale with Bangor Inc. In this session, we're going to talk about credit card processing for employee credit cards, specifically inside Sage Intacct. And what I'm going to do basically is take you through a few slides with credit card processing, especially for corporate cards inside the system. There's a bunch of different scenarios and different recommended workflows that you can do inside Sage Intacct, and it really is dependent on the specific scenario that your company has when processing these cards. In this session, we're going to specifically talk about one solution and how to do that in the system. So if we look at the screen here, basically there's various solutions and they're really specific. So in this scenario, we're going to be talking about you have one combined credit card vendor, you get one invoice from a credit card company, and within that credit card vendor, you have several employees that have their own card. So on the statement in this scenario, they do break out charges by employee card, but you still only get one invoice for this one account. Now, in this scenario, typically what's going to happen, and it doesn't have to happen this way, but in this scenario, we're going to assume that receipts for charges on these cards are being either turned into the office by the employees or they're entered in directly by the employees inside Sage Intacct. And then at that point, somebody in the office is going to reconcile those cards, and then we'll go through that process as well. So as far as a suggested workflow, basically, at a high level, here's what's going to happen, and we're going to go through these steps in detail. And there's some setup along the way that we're going to do first. But as far as an overall workflow, we are going to make sure we have what we call expense payment types set up that are linked to each one of those credit card accounts. So if you have one credit card account, we're going to set up one general ledger account called credit card payable. If you have multiple credit cards under this same scenario, that's okay. If you get a separate invoice, we'll have two GL payable accounts for that. And as far as how the receipts get entered into the system, we're going to enter those receipts, those charges directly in through the time and expense area inside Sage Intacct under staff expenses, or if the employee is entering them themselves, they can go right in directly under my expenses. Okay, and then what we're going to do is after that, we'll go through reconciling those expenses. We're going to set up and use a custom field in the system to track the reconciliation, and we'll go through that process as well. We'll also have a report that we'll look at. So typically a report will need to be created or can be provided to you by your business partner to track the reconciliation process and to compare that to the vendor credit card invoice. And then what we'll do is during that reconciliation process, if there's any entries missing, those can be entered back in the same area that the original entries were made under the staff expenses. And then we can run that report and tie out the invoice numbers in total. In this scenario, overall, a general manual AP bill will be entered into accounts payable for the overall invoice amount once it's reconciled in the system, and then it can be paid accordingly. And we'll go into that now and we'll take a look. So let's go ahead and take a look next. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get out of this PowerPoint and we'll close this up, and we're going to go into our Sage Intacct login screen. So there's a few things we need to make sure are set up in the Intacct system to be able to accomplish this workflow for the credit card processing. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you do have a general ledger account set up for each one of those separate credit card vendors' invoices that you receive. So what I did is over in General Ledger, under General Ledger Accounts, you can set up a new credit card account if you don't have one already. I set a couple up here. I have two credit cards that we're going to take a look at today. And I set it up under, let's see if I remember what number I used. So I set up two credit card accounts, one for a Citi card credit card payable and one for a Capital One. So basically we're just going to create a payable account, give it a number, and I like to call it exactly what the credit card name is. We'll get that set up in the general ledger system, just like you normally would for any other general ledger chart of account. So we'll want to make sure that's set up. The other thing is we're going to want a vendor set up in the system. Most likely you probably have one set up already. But if you go into accounts payable vendors, what we're going to do here is, let me flip this back to all. And we're going to want to make sure if you don't have a vendor set up for that particular card, let me go into my GC company. And this all depends on if you're setting up vendors at top level or not. Looks like I set this one up prior under the entity level. But if I go into this vendor, the most important thing here is obviously you're going to have to set up the vendor, the name, give it some terms, address for payment if you're sending a check. And one of the things you can do here under additional information is you can default the expense account. So when we end up entering in the accounts payable bill for that credit card invoice, we're going to default it to that credit card payable account. So we're going to have it accumulating in there. And then when we actually put the bill in and we pay that bill, we're going to reduce the default expense account, which in this case is the credit card payable account. So you want to make sure that account is filled in under additional information, default expense account. And then it's going to make you do a few things like in the payment information, make sure you have the terms filled in there as well. You can also put in, if you want to put the account number in there, you can put in the credit card, the mass credit card number in there as well under vendor account number. So you want to make sure that each of those vendors are set up, and I have one set up for the other Capital One as well. So you want to make sure that vendor is set up. So now we're going to go over to time and expense, and what we're going to do is we need to set up a method that tells the system that this expense is not reimbursable. So it's not an employee personal expense that needs to be reimbursed. And we need to tell it whenever you use this type that it goes to this credit card payable account. So that's going to be over in time and expense, setup. And there's something in the system under expenses called payment types. And these are used for various ways. If you have payroll, they're used for the payroll integration, but you can see here, you can create whatever you want. And you'll also notice that I must have created this at top level because there's no edit. And I would recommend that in case you're going to use this in multiple companies. But if I go over to my top level and do the same thing, payment types, now I can edit. So I set up one for each card. So I set up one Citibank, the Citi credit card, and the Capital One credit card. And let's just go in and click edit, and I'll show you kind of what you would do is you just put an ID, your name, description. You're going to check that it's non-reimbursable, and then you're going to put in the offset account. So this is going to be the credit card payable account in the general ledger that we set up in the first step. And that's all you really need to do. So basically, whenever you put an expense in with this payment type, it's going to credit the Citi credit card payable and then debit whatever expense that you're keying in for that charge. And then the same thing, if you use the Capital One, it's going to 2111. So you want to make sure that is set up. Then the other thing you need to set up in expenses is when you go in and put these charges in, you're going to notice it's not really going to show you a general ledger account. The general ledger account is going to be defaulting in based on the expense types that you use. So you're going to want to go in and set up different types of expenses, and they can be directly related to one general ledger expense account. You could even call them the expense account number. But under types here, I've set up a few. I'm going to click and include private because I think I set some up at different levels. But basically, you're going to go in here and create whatever type of expense or charge you may have during that receipt process when you're entering the charges in the system. So I put a few in here. I put tools, travel expense, truck expense, materials, if it's related to a project, cost of sales materials. You can have equipment rental, whatever you want. You're basically going to come into here and click add, or you can set one up and duplicate it. But if we go into edit, you're going to call it whatever you want, expense type ID. It can be a general ledger number as well. You're going to give it a description, and then you're going to tie it to an expense account. And this is where it's getting that expense account from. And then you can also tie it to an item in your system, which you probably already have material, sub, all that set up in the system. If there's a particular rate, you can pre-fill it in here, but if that varies, just leave it blank. So for example, this case doesn't apply, but if you were doing reimbursable mileage, let's say, if I hit edit, or if you want to charge travel to the project, you could put in a mileage rate right here, and then it'll pre-fill in for you. So you can do that type of stuff. So you need to have your expense types set up ahead of time. Now, when you're doing your data entry, you can add these on the fly if you forgot to set one up. So we'll take a look at that as well. You just want to make sure you have your different expense types set up ahead of time. And then basically now we're ready for our workflow process. So I'm going to return to the home screen and we'll go on to the next step. Okay, so what we're going to do now is actually go ahead and go through showing how we can record some of those receipts that either are being turned in from the office or being entered by the employees. What you can do is you can do a couple things here. I'm going to be in my entity level, and what we're doing here, I want to show you on the menu first, and then I'm going to show you kind of how you can put it together in a dashboard as well. But if you do have employee user licenses, the employees can log in. And when they log in, they will have the ability to enter their own receipts under My Expenses. So they will see that an employee license is limited, but one of the functions they can do is enter in their expenses and enter in their timesheets. So under My Expenses, they can go ahead and put their own in. In this scenario, we're going to assume that receipts are being turned in and somebody in the office is coming in under staff expenses and recording those transactions as they come in. So if you just want to go ahead and create a new one, you can hit the plus button and it'll bring you right into a new transaction. If you want to take a look at a list of what's already been entered in, you can click on staff expenses and it'll show you a list of charges that are already there. So for example, let's go ahead and do that. And you'll see here I have a list of transactions or expenses that have already been entered into the system. Now some are in here because this is demo data and some of these are reimbursables. What's really nice with Intacct is you can make your own views. So for example, I made a view of just open transactions, just transactions that have not been reconciled yet for each of the employees' credit cards. So you can see here, there's all my individual charges that have already been entered into the system, and you can pick and select your own columns, like a description of the charge, which I don't have on there right now, whether it's been reconciled or not, and who the employee is. So if you were just looking at one particular employee's charges, you could sort by employee, you could type in the employee name. So if you had a large list here, I just want to see Robert Jones's charges, you can do that in the system here. In addition to that, let me hit that enter there. I'm going to go ahead and click add. And if I do that, it's going to give me a screen where I can add my additional charges. So this is basically going to be where you can put in your receipt information. Now, these columns here are customizable as far as you can turn them on, turn them off, and change the order of the columns. So that's going to be important to get your entry screen set up the order and the flow that you want. And that's going to be, and it's the same way all over the system in Intacct, is under more actions, you'll see an edit expense entries layout. And in that case, you can take columns, you can move them off. Like Form 1099, I do not need. I can drag it back off out of the way. You know, which fields do I want in here? And you can move them around as well, and you can drag them up as well. So when you're done, you'll just click Save Layout. And now that'll be your layout and your order. And I've already set some up ahead of time in the system. So basically now what I can do is, here's the date of the charge. So let's say it's going to be October 12th. Here's the employee or the employee card that we're recording here. So if Robert Jones has a card, I'm going to select Robert Jones. And here you can put an attachment. So you can browse and add a new attachment. You can also drag and drop. So if I have, let me open up Explorer here. Oh, it's over here on this screen. If I go to, let me see, I think I have some expenses here. Let me go ahead and pull one up. So if I have a receipt, a file, for example, like one of these files here, I'll move it over here so we can see it. I can come into here and say, you know what, I'm going to drag this file, this receipt or image, and I'm going to drop it right on the attachment. And you can attach the file, the receipt here as well. And then you'll notice it saves it. And then you can always take a look at it right here on the paperclip. You can view that receipt with the transaction. Okay. Now, depending what fields you want to fill in or fill out, you could decide on that. There's a lot of fields here. One of the fields we did set up for this, and you will need to set this up in your instance, either with your business partner or go ahead and do it yourself, is a custom field. And I set up a custom field here called reconciled. And it's a drop-down list that basically says no or yes. You know, it can be whatever you want, a checkbox, whatever you want it to be. We'll use this later to report on it and to reconcile that function. But this is not an out-of-the-box field. It's a custom field, which is done in the top level under platform services, custom fields. And for help with that, I would reach out, you know, to us at help@bangerninc.com, and we can help you get that custom field set up. It's very easy to do, but doesn't hurt to have advice on it as well. So depending on what you fill on top is up to you. I haven't been filling out anything because what I have down below is enough. So one of the important fields is payment type. And you can require, any of these fields can be required with Smart Rule. So look for our videos on Smart Rule setup, and you can have a Smart Rule that, you know, you can set up so that payment type cannot be blank. I do believe this is a required field anyways. It's going to yell at you if you don't have one filled in, but just in case, any of these fields that you want to make sure are filled out, you can set up a Smart Rule for. And if they're left blank when you go to save it, the system will give you a message, error message, and not let you go on. So here's where we're going to say what card is it for. So you would only have your options here, but like we did earlier, we set up that Citi credit card. And by doing that, that tells us it's non-reimbursable. So this is a column that we really don't even need on the entry screen. And then you're going to have the ability to put a date in again. This is really the date that, and this date will be required. It does not pre-fill down here because technically you could enter one entry with multiple lines here and have different dates on there. If you get a batch of entries, you can do that as well. And you can put all your entries per line. So let's just say in this case, it is 1012 across the board. And with the use of dimensions in Sage Intacct, you can code other types of information. The one thing that you may want to track on these receipts is what vendor you paid the bill for. You know, you did the charge on. So you can add the vendor column on your entry screen, which I did, and you can pull a list up your vendors. And you can best fit that. So if I say Lowe's, you could pull your vendor in here. If you need to add a vendor, you can add a vendor on the fly, you know, and so forth. So we can go Lowe's. And then it's going to say what type of expense is it. So there's that pre-built list of my different expense types that you're going to want to have set up ahead of time. And like I said, you can list it as the GL number itself so that you can have a direct relationship here. I'm just going to put materials because I'm going to say they had to go buy some materials for a particular project they were going to. So now with the use of dimensions again, we can also code it to the job, the project costing as well at the same time. Now, if it's something that's not related to a project, office supplies, whatever, you can skip these columns. But in this case, we're going to say it's for the Houston project. And we bought some, let's see what we got here. We bought some shingles. And it was material. So you can job cost it just like you normally could. And then depending on your department setup, you may not need this column. That could pre-fill from the project as well. You do have a choice whether you want to enter your charge by quantity or just a flat amount. So if I say we bought 3 boxes and they were $40 each, and it'll pre-fill in for you. You do have some optional fields here, paid to, paid for. So again, if you're not really charging it to a project, you may want to fill these out a little bit more. Or if you don't necessarily want to set up a vendor for it, but you want to kind of put in who you paid it to, you can do a miscellaneous text paid to field here too. And all these can be on the report if need be. And they all store in the transaction. So we're going to leave those blank for now. And then also, if you are, we're not talking about it in this video, but if you are using credit card transaction using bank feeds, you can link this to a credit card transaction that's already been synced in a bank feed. You could say, yeah, that's related to this charge over in the credit card transactions. But in this case, we're not doing that. We're just manually putting the charges in. At that point, the charge is in the system. And depending on your workflow, when you click submit, the system will either take it in through an approval process or it'll post it directly into the system. So I don't have approvals turned on here, but if you did, you could hit submit and then, possibly somebody, project manager could approve this expense coding before it goes into the system because it'll go based on the project. So you can set up your own approval systems and we can talk. If you have any questions on that, again, reach out to us, help@bangerantinc.com, and we can help you with that approval system. So I'm going to go ahead here and enter that transaction and click submit. Now, as soon as I do that, that's a posted transaction in the system. You'll see it will show up as, 1012 right here as approved. And you can also notice that there is an attachment to it here as well. And it's approved. And if it's approved, that means it's posted in the system. So if I go back into that entry, so if I go ahead and click view, now you're going to have a posted transaction, and apologize for that. I thought we could see this right here, but it doesn't look like we can. Usually you can. So let's do this. Let's go and take a look over at the General Ledger Journal. So part of the configuration in time and expense is saying, all right, when we post the entry, what General Ledger Journal do you want it to go to? So if you're unsure of where it actually went to, maybe you didn't set up the system as far as the configuration goes, you can go into Setup Configuration here under Time and Expense, and it'll tell you right here, where is it posting to? And we have it set up to post directly to what's called the Direct Cost Journal. You can have a journal specifically called Credit Card Charges, whatever you want to call it, to break it out. But now if we go and take a look under General Ledger, Journal Entries, you're going to have a list of your journals. So now we know it went to this Direct Cost Journal right here. Could go to an Employee Expense Journal, wherever you want. I'm going to click View Transactions. And now you'll see transaction 20. That's most likely the one that we just did right there. We can go and view it. And I just wanted to show you the General Ledger entry that was made. So it actually put it to a credit card payable on the credit side. And then it put it to cost of sales material because we use that expense type of material to the debit side. So it's actually making your charge and you have it in your job costing as well. So that charge is in the system real time. And now it's just sitting there. And we go back into time and expense, staff expenses. It's sitting in there now in the system as a open transaction waiting to be reconciled. Okay. So what you can do is you can run reports on this information. And what I've done is you can help yourself in this process, especially if you're used to it in some legacy systems. You can make that transaction a little bit easier. Instead of using the direct menus in here, you can create your own dashboard. So always keep that in mind. And I like the dashboards for workflow setup as well. So I created a dashboard here called Company Credit Cards. And if I click on that, this is very simple right now. I think what I would do is expand it, maybe put a graph here showing charges by employees to date with a total. You can get fancy inside here, but right now I just started this one up here. And I just want to use it for my process. Step 1, record payments by credit cards. So those that use the Sage 300 process, if you're using the process through accounts payable, that's what you're used to it being called. In reality, if I click on it, it's going back into staff expenses where we were to start with. So you can kind of make that transition related to more of what you're used to it being called. Then from there, I did create a report to track those charges that are in the system already. So when you do get the statement in, you can come in and take a look at those, what's out there, and compare. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at that report. So it's called Employee Credit Card Receipts. This is not out of the box. So you're going to work with us and making sure that you have a report, or you create a report that's going to work for you in your process and your reconciliation. But I'm going to click on that report. And in this report, I've created some prompts and some filters that I can use to help get the information out that I need. So all of these filters and prompts can be tailored to what you guys want to be able to filter on. So basically I put a date prompt in here. So I want to be able to start date, end date. So if you get whatever your credit card statement comes as of, you want to kind of use that. You can do it by period, but I usually, let's say, for example, I want to see all charges from 10/1 to 10/31. And then depending on how you want to see it, you can see all your credit cards. You could see if I'm just working on the Citi card. So I have a filter on those different payment types. So I just want to see all of the charges for Citi credit card. And I want to see all the employees under Citi credit card, or I want to see one particular employee, Robert Jones. You could filter Robert Jones. I'm not going to filter anybody right now. And then what do I want to see? All transactions reconciled. So if you want to see all, you just leave it blank. If you just want to see open, you can just select the options here. I'm going to leave it blank for now. So let's go ahead and click view and kind of see what it looks like. We'll let that generate. It'll take a minute or so to get generated. And once that comes up, this report is built to show me by credit card and subtotal it by employee. So in this case, just how we need it from the statement that comes in. So our statement is going to give us subtotals by employees. So I want to do the same thing. So I have a subtotal in here showing me all of the charges for that period, whether they've been cleared by me or not. So I've already cleared these transactions. I've already checked them off. So if I'm looking at subtotals by employee Robert Jones, this should be so far what that subtotal is on my vendor invoice for that employee. Okay. And so you can kind of see them here. We have them subtotaled by cleared and open. And then I can continue on and go, oh, this one right here, that's cleared too. So you can do that a couple different ways. You can do this, in this case, right from the report. You can click on that transaction and it'll bring you back into that entry screen that we were into before. One of the things I don't have working on this report yet is when I click on this, it takes me there, but it doesn't open a separate window. It kind of loses that report, and I know we can do it so that it will open up a separate window, but then you can still get back to the report, and I haven't put that functionality into the report yet. So that's one way to do it. And if you'll notice here, it pops up and goes into that actual entry that we were in earlier. And if I click edit, I could then reconcile that right here. I can say, yes, this has been reconciled, and I can save that. The other way you can do it, and again, if I go back to my dashboard, is I can really go back into that record payment screen again, and you'll see a list of all your charges. And again, I have a filter on just showing open transactions. And then you can come into here and you can say, all right, there's this one. And same thing, I can click edit and reconcile here and save. Okay. So now if you notice, that goes off the menu. And then what I would want to do is have another filter on here that I didn't set up yet called reconciled transactions. So you can see them both. So what happens now is you can run that report again. And basically at that point, now let's do this employee. Oh, I'm sorry, credit card. Let's view that report. And you can go through that process and take a look at it. Now you see Robert Jones, they're all cleared now, all those existing transactions, and the total is 145. Yep, that equals what it says on the invoice. Overall, because we have Dennis too. Now we didn't clear Dennis, but now we can get an overall total for that period. And you can say, yeah, that, you know what, that is the credit card overall total, 2735 for all the employees. So we know that that bill is good to go. So I would go and reconcile these, and then we're ready for our next step. Now, there may be missing transactions. So just like before, you can come into here, and if there is missing transactions, you can find out, either through the employee. Once you find out, you can go ahead and record those additional staff expenses back in the original spot. They'll show up on this report. You can reconcile them. And once it's reconciled and you have your total, the last step would be to actually go and put your AP bill in, your invoice in. And you can put this in ahead of time too, but you would leave it in a draft mode until it's approved. But you can come into here and put in your AP bill. And in this scenario, I'm going to put it into the city card. And what'll happen now is, you notice it already pre-filled the GL account because I set that up in the vendor setup. And you put in your invoice number. You give it that amount, which was 27. I forgot the total. I'm just going to pretend it was 27. And at that point, you're pretty much done. You'll hit either post, or you can put it as a draft, and that's where you wait till you reconcile. But once you hit post, now it's going to pretty much take it out of your city credit card payable account and put it into accounts payable. And now you have a reconcile posted invoice in the system that can be paid just through a normal accounts payable process. So to recap, if you go through your general ledger, for example, and we take a look at, there's various reports, but if you go take a look at the general ledger report here, one of the things you can do is, you could say, show me start date 1/1 to 10/30. You want to see the activity for October. We just want to pick our credit card payable account, city credit card payable. And we can do you want to make sure that you also make sure you say detail here in your transactions. I want to see all the detail. And I'll click view. So this will give me a general ledger recap of what happened for the month. Here's our charges. There's our bill. Now, if I did this right, I almost picked the right number. If I did this right, it would actually be 0, right? So you put the charges in. You have the payable. Now, even from the general ledger, you can get back to this detail. So if you want to see what the heck was that $1,200 for, you can click on it right from here. It says it's an expense. And now here's all that information we had in the original entry. So you can get to it in the system. So to recap, I believe we covered the whole process. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard here. Let's go to our company credit card dashboard. Now you can get more reports out of the system. And you can add more tips and tricks here. I'm thinking my initial thought is to have a graph here for the period. And you can put in the period and it shows the employees and their amounts, totals across the top here. And you can easily see on a chart what the total might be for each employee. And you can see real easy and real quick if it already reconciles in the system. So this would be, again, a little recommended workflow for a particular scenario, which again, we recapped here, which is going to be the one credit card vendor invoice. Several employees have separate corporate cards for one account. You are getting them subtotaled, but one bill, and you reconcile them by employee, and you can turn in receipts or enter in transactions. And the recommendation for that, again, is through using the expense process with a payment type of non-reimbursable and charged to a particular credit card payable account. So I hope this video was helpful in helping you get this process set up in your system. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Reach out to us at help@bangerinc.com. And please like, subscribe. Any feedback is appreciated. Appreciate you guys spending some time with us today, and look forward to talking to you in future videos. Thank you and have a great day.